Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Relationships are the backbone of human connection, and one of the most powerful bonds is that between a man and a woman. Whether it's romantic, platonic, familial, or professional, that connection holds potential for growth, understanding, and support. But what happens when that contact is broken? When a man and woman stop communicating, whether due to misunderstanding, distance, ego, or deliberate choice, the consequences can be more profound than we imagine. Communication is the lifeblood of any meaningful relationship. It is through communication that trust is built, understanding is deepened, and emotional intimacy is nurtured. Whether the relationship is romantic, platonic, or professional, the ability to express thoughts, share feelings, and resolve conflicts hinges entirely on open and honest dialogue. When a man and woman communicate regularly and sincerely, they create a safe emotional environment where both parties feel heard, valued, and respected. This exchange fosters not just clarity, but also emotional security, a sense of knowing where one stands in a relationship. However, when communication breaks down or is deliberately cut off, the relationship begins to unravel. Silence breeds doubt, and doubt erodes the foundation that was carefully built over time. The absence of conversation can lead to assumptions, and assumptions often give rise to misunderstandings, resentment, or false conclusions. Over time, without the reinforcement of communication, the emotional bridge between two people can collapse, leaving both individuals feeling isolated and emotionally detached. So the connection that once thrived on shared experiences and mutual expression can quickly become strained, fragile, and distant simply because the flow of communication, so essential to any healthy relationship, has ceased. Silence is often misunderstood as harmless, even peaceful. But in the context of relationships, especially between a man and a woman, it can carry heavy emotional weight. While words have the power to heal or hurt, silence can do both, and sometimes in more damaging ways. Silence is not a neutral act. It is a form of communication in itself. And when used without clarity or intention, it often communicates the wrong message. One person may interpret silence as indifference, while the other sees it as a form of protection. The absence of words invites interpretation, and in the absence of truth, people create their own versions of it. These interpretations are rarely accurate and often shaped by fear, insecurity, or past trauma. As silence lingers, assumptions begin to fill the void. Assumptions about what the other person is thinking, feeling, or intending. These assumptions quickly harden into beliefs, and those beliefs form emotional barriers that prevent reconnection. The longer the silence continues, the wider the emotional gap grows. What might have started as a short pause can snowball into emotional isolation, breeding confusion and hurt. In time, silence stops being just a lack of words. It becomes a loud signal of emotional withdrawal. And in many cases, by the time one person tries to speak, the other has already built walls too tall to hear anything through them. The absence of contact between a man and a woman can occur in many forms and for various reasons, some deliberate and some unintentional. Sometimes one or both individuals consciously choose to distance themselves, believing that silence might bring clarity, create space, or serve as a protective barrier against further emotional turmoil. Other times, contact fades without a clear reason. Life becomes busy, priorities shift, or a subtle misunderstanding quietly drives a wedge between two people who were once close. Regardless of whether the lack of contact is a conscious choice or a gradual drift, the emotional impact is often significant. What one person may view as a healthy pause, the other may interpret as rejection, abandonment, or emotional neglect. This disparity in perception can lead to internal conflict, where both individuals are left wondering about each other's thoughts, feelings, and intentions. Over time, the absence of communication begins to weigh heavily, creating feelings of confusion, sadness, or even betrayal. It disrupts the natural rhythm of the relationship and leaves space for overthinking, self-doubt, and emotional disconnection. In many cases, neither person intended to cause harm, yet both end up carrying emotional burdens that grow heavier with each passing day of silence. The pain of not knowing, of questions unanswered, of messages unsent can be just as hurtful as words spoken in anger. And while the reasons behind the lack of contact may vary, the emotional consequences are real and often leave lasting scars on the hearts of those involved. In the natural ebb and flow of human relationships, there are moments when stepping back is not only helpful, but essential. When emotions run high, especially after conflict, taking space can provide a much needed pause to reflect, cool down, and regain emotional balance. In these situations, distance is not a sign of disinterest or abandonment. It can actually be a sign of emotional maturity and self-awareness. A man and a woman who choose to momentarily disconnect may be doing so to avoid saying things they might later regret, or to allow themselves the mental clarity to process what just occurred. However, the effectiveness of this space depends entirely on its intention and duration. Space that is purposeful allows individuals to evaluate their emotions, consider the other person's perspective, and determine how to re-engage in a way that fosters healing. But when that space becomes prolonged without explanation, it can quickly shift from being a healthy boundary to a destructive silence. The longer the distance lingers without communication or context, the more room it creates for insecurity, mistrust, and emotional withdrawal. One person may be using the time to reflect and regroup, while the other interprets the silence as rejection or punishment. What was meant to be healing can unintentionally become harmful. Therefore, taking space must be done with care, respect, and clear communication. It should not be used as a weapon, a means of control, or a way to avoid accountability. When both parties understand and agree upon the need for space, and when there is an intention to return to the relationship with greater understanding, that temporary distance can become a powerful tool for growth. But when it lacks purpose or mutual understanding, it becomes just another crack in the foundation of the relationship. When a man and woman stop contacting each other for an extended period, it's often tempting to interpret the silence as closure. On the surface, it may appear as though both individuals have moved on, accepted the circumstances, and found peace in their separation. However, in many cases, this prolonged avoidance masks a deeper emotional struggle. Beneath the quiet may lie a tangle of unresolved feelings, hurt, confusion, disappointment, longing that neither person has confronted. Avoidance can be a coping mechanism, a way to escape the discomfort of vulnerability or the pain of confrontation. It can also be driven by ego, the internal voice that insists on being right, refuses to appear weak, or demands that the other person make the first move. Pride often keeps people from admitting they miss someone, from apologizing, or from expressing how much something truly mattered to them. Fear also plays a significant role. Fear of rejection, fear of reigniting conflict, fear of not being heard or understood. These emotional undercurrents create an illusion of resolution when in reality, the issues remain buried, festering just beneath the surface. The longer the silence continues, the more the unspoken feelings solidify, and the harder it becomes to reopen the conversation. Over time, this avoidance can harden into resentment or numbness, but it rarely brings genuine peace. True resolution requires acknowledgement, expression, and often difficult dialogue. Without it, the relationship remains suspended in a state of emotional incompleteness. What looks like indifference on the outside may actually be emotional paralysis, a standstill where both people are waiting for the other to speak first while quietly carrying the weight of all that was left unsaid. At the heart of every meaningful relationship lies the essential human need for connection, an emotional bond that can only be nurtured through empathy and open communication. When a man and woman are able to express their thoughts and feelings freely, without fear of judgment or dismissal, they create a foundation of trust and emotional safety. Empathy, the ability to truly listen and understand another's perspective, is what allows people to bridge emotional gaps, especially in times of conflict or confusion. It is through dialogue, not withdrawal, that misunderstandings are cleared, wounds are addressed, and intentions are clarified. Silence, on the other hand, removes the opportunity for these exchanges to occur. When one or both parties withdraw emotionally or physically, it sends a message, often unintentionally, that the relationship is not worth the effort to repair or sustain. This absence of communication can make the other person feel invisible, invalidated, or emotionally abandoned. Over time, silence becomes not just a gap in conversation, but a growing chasm between two people who once cared for each other. Dialogue allows space for vulnerability, for apology, for clarification, and for connection. Even the most difficult conversations, when handled with empathy, can strengthen a relationship rather than break it. It is in talking through the discomfort and being willing to listen even when it's hard that relationships grow stronger and deeper. Withdrawing into silence might feel safe in the moment, but it prevents the emotional growth that dialogue naturally fosters. Human relationships are not built to thrive in isolation. They need warmth, expression, and understanding to survive. Without these vital elements, even the strongest bonds can begin to fray, not from what was said, but from everything that was left unsaid. When communication between a man and a woman breaks down, it does more than just disrupt the flow of words. It halts emotional progress. Relationships are dynamic. They evolve through shared experiences, mutual expression, and the ability to grow together through both joy and adversity. But when contact is severed and communication is no longer present, that natural evolution comes to a standstill. Emotions that are not expressed become bottled up. Thoughts that are not shared begin to rot into assumptions, and lessons that might have been learned together remain unacknowledged. This leads to emotional stagnation, where both individuals are frozen in a version of the relationship that never reached completion. Growth is stunted because growth requires dialogue, reflection, and resolution, none of which can happen in silence. The pain of not communicating lingers in the form of what ifs. What if I had said how I truly felt? What if we had tried to understand each other better? Over time, these unspoken thoughts morph into regret, a quiet but persistent ache over opportunities lost, and emotional doors left closed. In many cases, the relationship might have been salvageable, or at the very least brought to a meaningful close if communication had continued. But instead, both parties are left suspended in emotional limbo, unable to move forward, yet unwilling or unable to go back. The cost of broken communication is not just the end of a relationship. It is the loss of potential, the chance to grow as individuals, to learn from one another, and to emerge stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. In silence, that potential withers, and all that remains is the echo of what could have been. Taking the step to reach out to someone after a period of silence or broken contact can be one of the most vulnerable and courageous acts a person can make. When a man and woman have grown apart due to misunderstanding, hurt feelings, or unspoken tension, the idea of reestablishing contact often comes with fear and uncertainty. There's always the possibility that the gesture will not be well received, or that the conversation won't bring about the resolution one hopes for. However, the true value of reaching out lies not in guaranteeing reconciliation, but in restoring a sense of emotional completeness. By making the effort to speak, to explain, to listen, or simply to acknowledge what happened, both individuals are given the opportunity to release the weight of unfinished emotion. Closure is not always found in agreement or reunion. It can be found in a kind word, in clarity, or even in the respectful acceptance that the relationship has run its course. Without this final moment of truth, people often carry unresolved pain and unanswered questions for years, sometimes even for a lifetime. Reaching out is not about begging or surrendering. It's about choosing growth over ego, peace over pride. And while it doesn't guarantee a full restoration of the bond, it does create space for healing, both for the one who initiates and for the one who receives it. In some cases, that single gesture can reignite a dormant connection, allowing the relationship to evolve into something healthier and more honest than before. Even when the outcome is not what one hoped for, the act itself is transformative. It shifts the narrative from silence to strength, from avoidance to intention, from unresolved to acknowledge. In the end, relationships, whether blossoming or broken, are shaped not only by the words we speak, but also by the silences we allow. When a man and a woman choose not to contact each other, the reasons may vary, but the emotional consequences often echo far beyond the silence itself. Let us not allow pride, fear, or unresolved emotions to become permanent walls. Sometimes a simple message, a conversation, or a moment of honesty is all it takes to transform distance into understanding. Reaching out doesn't guarantee a perfect ending, but it opens the door to peace, growth, and maybe even a new beginning. Because in a world where disconnection is easy, choosing connection, even when it's hard, is one of the bravest things we can do. Thank you.